For Parshas Nitzavim, I wanted to take a look at a couple of Scribal Anomalies. The Scribal Anomalies that appear in Parshas Nitzavim are actually, there's two of them that appear in two psukim that come one after the other, contiguous psukim. The Torah here in Parshas Nitzavim is a follow-up from the Tochacha, from the very scary rebuke with all of the potential curses that will befall the Jewish people for not following Hashem. And the Torah starts off by saying, at some point, that all of these terrible things are going to happen, and they're going to happen in the diaspora when you're living among non-Jews. V'yamaru kol hagoyim. All of the other nations, this is in Perek Chavtet, Pasuk Chav Gimel, the other nations are going to say, Al me asa Hashem kacha la'aretz hazot. Why did God do this to this land, the land of Israel, by decimating it and exiling all its people? Mechori ha'af hagadol hazeh. Why all of this? Where does this divine wrath come from? Ve'ameru, and they will say, Al asher azvu et brit Hashem Elokei avotam, because they forsook the covenant of their ancestors that God made with their ancestors, B'hotziotam me'eretz Mitzrayim, when He took them out of Egypt. Vayelchu vayavdu Elohim acherim vayishtachavu lahem. They went and they worshipped false gods. Elohim asher lo yida'um v'lo chalak lahem. These are gods that were neither known to them nor allotted to them, meaning that they chose foreign cultures' gods over their own culture. They forsook their own cultural god, their own deity, and they chose something that was never meant for them, was never allotted to them. And a lot of times that's human nature. We think that the exotic thing is the better thing, right? The guy sitting in the Himalayas, he must have all of the wisdom, right? When in reality, sometimes the very key to that wisdom in the Himalayas comes from the Torah itself. And so therefore, Pasuk Chavav says, Vayicharaf Hashem ba'aretz hahi, la'avi aleh kol ha'klala k'tuva b'sefer hazeh, that God therefore brought down His wrath and the curse that is written in this scroll that you have just heard about, all of the curses. And as a result, Vayitashem Hashem me'al admatam, God scattered them and removed them from their land. Ba'af u'v'chema u'v'ketzef gadol, with wrath, with anger, and with great fury. Vayashlichem el eretz acheret kayom hazeh. And God sent them out to another land as this day, or to this day. And so therefore, if you want to know, how did the Jews end up in the Gullies? The answer is very simple. This tells you exactly what happened, and it even tells you that this is what the nations of the world will surmise. That when the Jews forsake their God, this is what happens to them. And then finally, Chavchet says, Hanistarot l'Hashem Elokeinu. That which is hidden belongs to God. V'haniglot lanu levanenu ad olam. That which is revealed is for us and our children forever. La'asot et kol divrei haTorah hazot, to do all of this Torah, all of this commandment. Now, the two anomalies is that in Pasuk Chav Zayin, the word vayashlichem, that God thrust them away or sent them away to another land. So what, of course, the strange letter, this is just appears in the Sefer Torah this way. The letter Lamed is larger than all of the other letters on that line. And if you open a Sefer Torah, you'll see the very, very prominent letter Lamed, larger in font than all of the other letters. Another curiosity of that word Vayashlichem is that the letter Yud would normally appear, and the letter Yud is missing. And we're going to talk about those two things. The second pasuk is what we're not going to talk about today, but I refer you to Rashi if you're interested, why there are dots on top of the words Lanu ulevanenu, for us and for our children. Now, Rashi tells us that anytime you find dots on top of a word, it's almost like it's italicizing the words. The Torah doesn't have italic fonts or bold fonts. It's got one standard font. So when you want to try and accentuate that, to say that something is unusual, you put dots on top of the word. And this appears in a few places in the Chumash, but Lanu Levanenu is coming to exclude, meaning what? that this pasuk of Hanistarot Lashem Elokeinu, that which is hidden belongs to the Lord our God, that is trying to point out that God alone is responsible for sins committed in privacy. V'haniglot lanu levanenu, but that which is revealed is for us and for our future descendants. But even that has certain limitations based upon the ability for the community to know. If we are aware of a sin, then we all have to bear responsibility for that. If someone does something flagrantly and in public, we have to take responsibility, and we have to take communal resources in order to address the issue. But if you take a look at Rashi, he addresses why the dots are in the words lanu ulevanein. But I want to speak on the word vayashlichem, this large letter yud, and the Baal HaTurim addresses this issue. Vayashlichem, source number 2, lamed gedola v'chaser yud, a big lamed and a missing letter yud, that when God sends the Jewish people away. Lomar, she'ein hashlacha kizot liyud hashevatim. This is to teach me that this sending away does not apply to the 10 tribes. This sending away, that God exiling the Jewish people off their land, does not apply to the 10 tribes of Israel. Now, what is the Baal HaTurim talking about? It doesn't apply to the 10 tribes of Israel. If anything, it especially applies to the 10 tribes, because the 10 tribes were exiled in the times of Sancheriv. Just a quick history. When the temple was finally destroyed, the first temple was finally destroyed, in the 4th century before the Common Era, all of the Jews that were remaining in Eretz Yisrael, almost all the Jews who were remaining in Eretz Yisrael, were exiled to Bavel, to Babylonia. But several decades before the temple was destroyed, there was the Assyrian king Sancheriv took the Jews who were living in the northern kingdom of Israel and exiled them first. So that by the time of the destruction of the temple, all you had were primarily 2 tribes that were left in Eretz Yisrael, the tribe of Yehudah and the tribe of Binyamin. So that's the brief history. And when we say that the Yud Shvatim were therefore exiled, what we mean to say is that they were exiled before the rest of the Jewish people, and we haven't met them yet, or we haven't reunited with them yet, except in very small number. So some say that Ethiopian Jews are from the tribe of Dan. We have some historical evidence for that. There are some other suggestions as far as different other African tribes, peoples from, they say, B'nai Menashe. Some remnants of the tribe of Menashe are in Asia. But these are all, none of this has been actually corroborated, but there's certainly supporting evidence for this. But by and large, we have not yet been reunited with the 10 tribes. We may never be reunited with the 10 tribes. So the Baal HaTurim writes that this sending out of the Jewish people does not apply to the 10 tribes. So what in the world does he mean? Well, it seems that you have to really look at the ensuing psukim, the next few psukim that starts with chapter 30. We just read the last psukim from chapter 29, but then if we read the ensuing psukim from chapter 30, I think we get an idea of what the Baal HaTurim really means to say. Because then the Torah says, V'haya, source number 3, Ki yavo alecha kol hadvarim ha'ila habracha v'haklala, when all of these things occur to you, the blessing and the curse, asher natati lefanecha, that I have placed before you, when you see a realization of all of the things that I have portended, V'hashivota el levavecha b'chol hagoyim asher hidichacha Hashem elokecha shama. Then you're going to do tshuva. V'hashivota el levavecha. You'll return to your heart, and you'll start thinking. When you're in Gullies, you'll start thinking about, hey, what am I doing here? How did I get here? What's going on? What's wrong? Where did we go wrong? Why are the Jews exiled from Eretz Yisrael? V'shavta Hashem elokecha v'shamata b'kola. And then you'll do tshuva, you'll return to God, you will hearken to his voice, you'll start doing the mitzvahs again, V'shav, and then pasuk gimel, V'shav Hashem elokecha tshuvutecha v'richamecha, V'shav kibetzcha mikol ha'amim, asher hevitzecha Hashem elokecha shama. then God will gather you back and bring you back to Eretz Yisrael. And im hiyeh nidachacha b'ktzei hashamayim, even if your dispersed ones are in the corners of the heavens, misham yikabetzcha Hashem Elokecha u'misham yikachecha. God will still bring you back from the farthest reaches of wherever mankind can be found. Hashem will bring you back, and you'll come back to Eretz Yisrael. And vehitivacha v'yirbecha me'avotecha, and He will do even better for you than what He did for your ancestors. Life will be even better than what it was before. So we know from the Mishnah in Masechet Sanhedrin that there's a machlokes as to whether the 10 tribes will ever return. That's a scary idea, right? There's actually a machloket, will the 10 tribes ever return when the rest of the Jewish people return? It's a machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer. The Mishnah says, Aseret hashvatim einan atidim lachzor. The 10 tribes will never return. They were exiled and they're never coming back. Shene'amar vayashlichem al eretz acheret kayom hazeh. That God sent them away permanently. And the way that the Baal HaTurim reads it is as follows. You have to say, in other words, you have to sort of manipulate it a little bit, and you have to read it as follows. The Baal HaTurim says this sending away does not apply to the 10 tribes in the way that it applies to the rest of the Jewish people. For the rest of the Jewish people, the hashlacha, the sending away, is temporary. But for the 10 tribes, it is permanent. So it's not that they won't be sent away at all, but when they are sent away, they will be permanently gone. And therefore, the Baal HaTurim subscribes to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Eliezer disagrees, and he says, now, first of all, how do you see that from the pasuk? Kayom hazeh, because God will send them away like this day, or to this day. So Rabbi Akiva reads it, just like this day comes and will never come back. You can never bring back yesterday. So too you can never bring back the 10 tribes. Just like today will be gone after today is over. Once the 10 tribes were sent away, it was permanent. But Rabbi Eliezer has a different way of reading it. Kayom hazeh, mayom ma'afilu me'ir, af aseret hashvatim sha'afela lahen, kach atida leha'ir lahen. He has a much more optimistic way of reading Kayom hazeh, just like today. Not just today, this one day, September 24th, 2019, but rather just like any day. Just like any day, the sun sets and it becomes dark at the end of the day. That's what happened to the 10 tribes. The world went dark for them. But tomorrow, the sun comes back up, and the sun will come out tomorrow. Bet your bottom dollar. And so that's the attitude that Rabbi Eliezer has. His attitude is that tomorrow there'll be sun. And just like tomorrow there'll be sun, so too tomorrow the 10 tribes will come back. It's all a question of how you read Kayom Hazeh. How do you read like this day? Is like this day this unique day that will never be relived in all of history? Or like this day, just like the day is followed by night, and then the sun comes up again, so too the 10 tribes have to go through a period of great darkness, but then the sun will shine for them again, and they will come back. Yes?
Seems like a departure from Rabbi Akiva's usual
optimistic view. Yeah, it does. So there are a number of commentaries that try to explain Rabbi Akiva and try to temper it. But at least now we know where the Baal HaTurim is coming from. But the question that I still have on the Baal HaTurim is that at least it's explained why the Yud is missing from the word Vayashlichem. Remember, that was the whole thing that he was trying to explain. Why is there a big Lamed and a missing Yud? So it seems like he hasn't really answered the question. He's told us why there's a missing Yud, because the type of hashlacha that we're discussing is for the other 2 tribes of Yehuda and Binyamin, but not for the 10 tribes, because their hashlacha is a different kind of hashlacha. It's a permanent hashlacha that will never come back. But what about the big lamed? Where does the Baal HaTurim explain why the lamed is larger than all the other letters? That he hasn't explained. So it's a very mysterious, very cryptic Baal HaTurim. So the publisher of some of the Chumashim puts at the end of the Baal HaTurim's commentary, which I have for you in source number 2, Ayin Bereshit Rabbah Perek Ayin Gimel. He says, take a look at the Medrash Rabbah on Sefer Bereshit, chapter 73, and that's it. Just sends you to a source. Let's take a look at that source. First of all, it's important to know that the pasuk, which that Medrash is commenting on, is the birth of Yosef. The birth of Yosef, Rachel's first son Yosef. And the Torah in Parshat Vayetze says, Vatikra et shemo Yosef lemor, that she called his name Yosef, saying, Yosef Hashem li ben acher. May God add on for me another son. May God grant me another son. And her prayer was answered because her second son was Binyamin. It's quite unusual for Rachel. You know, usually when a woman gives birth to a child, she says, I need a break. Oh. But she calls her son Yosef immediately and saying, you know what? I want more children, even more after this, which shows you how desirous she was. This may have to do with the fact that her sister Leah had so many more children. We're not really sure. But the point is that she was so desirous to have this other child, even after just having given birth to Yosef. May God give me another son. Now, I want you to look at the curious thing about this pasuk. We underline 2 words, Yosef Hashem li, may God add for me another son, acher. Take a look at the Medrash Rabbah in source number 6. Acher legalut. May God give me another son for exile. What does that mean? Another son for exile. So let's read a little bit further. Amar Rabbi Yehuda beRabbi Simon, lo lemakom shegalu aseret hashvatim, gala shevet Yehuda uVinyamin. I want another son because I want a different kind of exile. My first son, Yosef, represents the 10 tribes of Israel. Because if you know the historical precedent, right, you know the historical record, the northern part of Israel, the primary shevet was Ephraim, and all of the other shvatim were somehow subservient to shevet Ephraim, which represents Yosef. And so when we say that the 10 tribes were exiled, we're also suggesting that the Josephite portion of Israel was sent into exile. And that was a permanent exile. And what Rachel was saying prophetically is that I know that eventually my son Yosef and all of the tribes that join together with him will eventually go into exile, but that will be a permanent exile. They may never come back. May God give me another son for whom, when it's time to go into exile, he'll eventually come back. Aseret hashvatim galu lifni minahar sambatyon, shevet Yehuda v'Inyamin mefuzarim b'chol ha'aratzot. The 10 tribes were exiled to the other side of the Sambatyon River. This is part of the legend of the 10 tribes. Some of you may have read about the legends of the 10 tribes. The Sambatyon River is a river that, according to tradition, is a raging river which is impossible to traverse. You can't cross it. It's impossible. You'll be swept away because the currents are so enormous, and it only rests on Shabbos when we can't travel anyway. That's the legend. There's a midrash that says that. And so because the 10 tribes are on the other side of the Sambatyon, they're entirely inaccessible to the rest of the Jewish people, cut off permanently from the rest of the Jewish people. But Yehuda and Binyamin, they're dispersed among all of the nations. So they know that they're still Jews. They have Jewish identity and they will be able to come back eventually. Now, let's consider the pasuk again. Vatikrat shmo Yosef lemor, Yosef Hashem li ben acher. May God give to me another son. Lamed Yud, li, to me. What letters are unusual about the word vayashlichem? The Lamed is bigger, and the Yud is non-existent. I believe that's what the Baal HaTurim is alluding to when he says li, When the pasuk says li, it means that this represents the two sons, Yosef and Binyamin, respectively. Now we know how Yud represents Yosef and the 10 tribes, because Yud is gematria of 10. So it makes sense for that to be the 10 tribes. Why is Lamed representative of Binyamin, and why is it so big? And so this is the sort of the part that I'm sort of taking liberty with. The smallest letter in the Hebrew alphabet is the letter Yud. What's the largest letter in the Hebrew alphabet? When I say large, what I mean is that it protrudes higher than all of the other letters. That's the letter Lamed. And I think what part of this letter Lamed is reassuring us is that the Jewish people are people of extremes. When we assimilate, we either disappear entirely, or we become larger than life and become more pronounced than every other person in the world. And that's the reason why Binyamin, which represents the diaspora Jew, is the letter Lamed, larger than all of the other letters. And that's a fulfillment of Rachel's prayer. God, give me a different kind of son. I know that the Yosef persona among the Jewish people, when they encounter diaspora, will disappear entirely and completely assimilate into the rest of the world. And by the way, that's part of the Yosef persona, because if you recall, the function of Yosef is to be able to pave the way for the rest of the Jews going into the diaspora, but sometimes making himself as the korban, as the sacrifice, as it were, to be able to create habitation and hospitality for the rest of the Jewish people. And there are going to be Yosefs throughout Jewish history who are going to be the court viziers, and are going to be the bankers, and are going to be the ones who pave the way to let Jews live in other countries and other lands. And they may end up, because they were the pioneers in those places, ending up disappearing entirely. But I also pray, Hashem, that you give me another son that represents the Rachel component of the Jewish people, and that is the son that's larger than life. That wherever the Jew goes, he'll be the one who wins the most Nobel Prizes in achievement and scholarship at the sciences, in physics and in chemistry and in literature. And when the Jew gets involved in any kind of endeavor, societal endeavor, they will emerge and float to the top. And they will always be larger than life, and the Jew will always be overrepresented in any kind of social endeavor that exists. So that we may be the smallest in number, we may be 0.5% of the world, but we will always rise to the top, and the world will always look at us and think that we are far more numerous than we really are. And we will always be at the center of everything that is pivotal and seminal to the advancement of world history. That's the reason why the letter Lamed represents Binyamin. It represents the tall Lamed, and the missing Yud represents the Jew in the diaspora. Not just the 10 tribes per se, but also any kind of Jew who has to go into the diaspora and eventually disappears. That will be compensated with the larger letter Lamed. And it's what we've seen. It's what we've seen throughout Jewish history, what we're seeing actually today. That the world is preoccupied with the state of Israel, the Jewish state. The world is preoccupied with the Jewish people. The world fixates upon the Jews, and the Jewish people, for better or for worse, and many times it is for worse, are at the forefront of every social movement that's going on in the world today. And that's just the way it is. It's being larger than life. So, something to think about is that when we go into the Yamim Noraim and we think about all of the events that have happened over the past year where Jews have been so involved, we read about the Israeli elections, and there's so many other things for us to consider about what's going to happen over the course of the coming year. Part of the thing to pray for is that the Jewish people continue to make a Kiddush Hashem, and that our Lamed stands tall. that we don't lose more yuds and we gain a lot more lamids, and that the world looks at us with admiration and not with anti-Semitism. Okay, that's part one. Any questions and comments? Yes, Patricia.
If the 10 tribes are never going to come back, where does the idea of Mashiach ben Yosef come from?
It's a good idea. It's a very good idea. It's a very good question. First of all, one answer that you would give is that the idea of Mashiach ben Yosef only can consistently coexist if you look at Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, which is that there will be a return of the 10 tribes. But also Mashiach ben Yosef is a concept that whoever the messianic figure, who is Mashiach ben Yosef? He is a messianic figure that tragically dies before the messianic age. He paves the way for Mashiach ben David.
He's the precursor.
He's the precursor. He is the necessary korban for the Mashiach ben David. And so it's very consistent with the idea of the diaspora Jew who completely gets lost. Not that we look at him as a bad person, but we look upon him as the martyr, as the person who needed to be sacrificed in order for the greater good of the Jewish people and the world and the history of the world to be realized. Yes.
It's just inconceivable that when Mashiach comes, 10 tribes disappear completely. It's 10 sons of Yaakov. That's where we're coming from.
Yeah. So there are commentaries, I don't remember them offhand, there are commentaries that say that Rabbi Akiva doesn't mean that they'll be really, really lost permanently, but that they will come back in some other way, maybe much later they'll come back. Just like they left earlier, they'll have to come back much later. Yeah, we certainly hope so. Now listen, we're seeing a realization of the slow return of the 10 tribes into the fold. We're constantly discovering more and more Jews that were lost. The wave of Ethiopian Jewry is one example of that. We're seeing people who may not have come from the 10 tribes, but were lost to assimilation and to intermarriage and forced conversion for centuries. And we have this concept, HaTorah chozeret al achsan yeshelo. The Torah always comes back to its original host. And what that means is that even someone who has Zera Yisrael, even someone who has some Judaism, some Jews in their lineage, sometimes feels this stirring to come back. And so we're seeing that also. We've seen that for decades and for centuries. Okay, yes?
Something I just did a film about the lost 10 tribes.
Mm-hmm.
That when they come, like, if people come to Israel, are they going to be recognized? That's a big problem.
No, I don't think it's a big problem. I think it's a small problem. We'll work it out. We'll work it out. The chief rabbinate will come up with some solution, just like they did with the Ethiopians. They said, gerut l'chumra. They said, do a conversion l'chumra, to be machmir and to make sure that just in case, because we're not 100% sure, go to the mikveh. Okay, next, Rosh Hashanah.